Hey, what's up, everybody? Fred Minnick here, and today I'm going to tackle a very big question from a member of my whiskey club, Club Marzipan. If you want to learn more about Club Marzipan, you can click on the link in the description of this video. Now, before I jump into that, there's a couple things I want to cover. One, the chair. Okay, so in my last video, everyone's like, oh my God, Fred, your chair's squeaking too much. Your chair's squeaking too much. It's so squeaky. Oh, it's so squeaky. Oh, it's so squeaky. You got to fix the chair. So I do want to tell everyone that I have invested in some WD-40 and I'm going to oil the chair and fix this problem. But so my apologies for all those I've been annoying with my squeaky chair. But I got to admit, I was kind of being ornery by continue doing it. And I was messing with people in the comments. They were. I was like, "What squeaky chair? What squeaky chair?" And they thought I was serious. And I realized I was like, "All right, I won't mess with anybody anymore." But I'm also not doing tastings. I'm getting organized for my top 100. We're doing like an inventory check, and we might have to replace a bottle or two. And as you heard in that last video that I did, Wild Turkey Generations is the first alternate, which I didn't think about it when I put that in that first alternate hole. But Wild Turkey Generations is basically ranked 101st, which is hilarious because that is they're known for Wild Turkey 101. But got a kind of a kick out of that when someone pointed that out. You know, it's crazy. You're so close to something, you don't even see something so obvious sometimes. But that was pretty funny. But yeah, so I'm not doing any tasting videos. I am actively tasting, but not like in any kind of like review capacity. So I'm just kind of getting my palate ready for my top 100 tasting, which is December 20th at 7 p.m. I hope you're going to be there. Make sure you check that out. You can find it in the upcoming live streams here on the channel. And so I hit up Club Marzipan and I said, hey guys, I'm not tasting at all this month. I need your help for some videos so I can continue putting out cool content. And they have been hitting me up with a lot of good ones. So I'm going to tackle them kind of one at a time. And today we are going to start with this great question from Club Marzipan member Scott Corgle. How about one with your feelings on the explosion of bourbon producers over the past 10 years and impacts to those of us who love bourbon? You know, when I was ever had to do like press conferences, when I've been trained to do press conferences in whatever capacity, there's a technique. They say like, if you get a question that kind of stumps you a little bit, take a drink of water before you answer it. That way you can pause and kind of collect your thoughts. And so that's what I did there. But by telling you I did that, I even gathered some more time for me to tackle this. So this is a big one. This is a big question, Scott. Really big question. And I gotta be, I don't know. All right, so let's take a look at the last 10 years. So the last 10 years, there's been an explosion of consumers in the bourbon community. That's a big thanks to Gen X and the millennials. Also, people of new blood coming into the game that is touching markets that have never been touched before, or at least had a big focus on it. So that is all exciting. I am really excited about the growth of good bourbon. 10 years ago, if there was a new still going in, if there's a new warehouse, a new visitor center, that was exciting. I was writing about those things for Whiskey Magazine and Whiskey Advocate and Tasting Panel, and everybody was just all excited about it. And there was just the beginning of people saying, like the consumers saying, like, ugh, I wish all these new people weren't coming into bourbon because now I can't get the bottle I want. And 10 years ago was when we started seeing, 10 years ago would have been 2013. So that would have been when we started seeing like the slow decline of availability of something like Weller 12-year-old. Blanton's was still on the shelf. So 2013, Blanton's was still on the shelf. Henry McKenna was still on the shelf. So things like that were still readily available. Pappy had become scarce and was beginning to go the way of the lottery. And that was, I'd say Pappy today is not too far off from where it was 10 years ago. I'd say there's more people who know about Pappy today than there was 10 years ago. But for the most part, Pappy was still very much scarce and sought after and all that and 10 years ago. But the sentiment of wanting to keep people out of bourbon really began, I would say, 15, 20 years ago. But really 10 years ago, we did see the beginning of like, I'm done. Like people checking out of like, of where bourbon was headed because they were like, I'm tired of the games that I have to play to get a bottle. And that is a real sentiment. That sentiment is very real, and people feel that very strongly, and they get tired of all the hunting they have to do, the favors they have to call in, and they just want things to go back to where they could walk into a store and get a bottle they want. And that sadly, that we're not going back to that, at least anytime soon. And all the growth in bourbon is meant to make sure there's more product out there. At least that's what you would think. But the truth is, most of the development at these distilleries is to open new markets. And what I mean by that are foreign markets. The bourbon community, the bourbon industry has never really touched Europe like it has, Canada and Mexico. Like Europe has always been, they want more access to Europe. And Europe's been closed off since World War II. Things have opened up there, here and there. The demand has gotten a little bit better. But the fact is, you go into a restaurant in Poland, you might see at most 5 to 10 bourbons. I remember going to a kind of an American whiskey type bar in Portugal, and there might have been 30 bourbons there. And the funny thing is that those bourbons were all old. And so there's incredible value in Europe if you are a whiskey lover and hunter. It's like you can go in these old shops and, there's real Dusties there from the 80s that no one ever bought. And they're like, hey, you want this? Because the people don't care about bourbon there like they do here. It's growing, but it's nowhere near close. Anyway, so a lot of that growth has been meant to open new markets, tap into new consumer streams, and what have you. Yep, there's that chair. There's that squeaky chair. Soon, that squeak will be cured by some WD-40. Now, why didn't I do it before this video? Well, I just didn't, so I could have one more good squeaky video for you all. But let me kind of like back up here for a second. Let me reread the question, make sure I'm answering this right, because I feel like I'm rambling at this point. How about one with your feelings on the explosion of bourbon producers over the past 10 years and impacts to those of us who love bourbon? Okay, so I talked a little bit about the growth and just kind of how bourbon had evolved and moved on. But if you talk about the sheer number of producers, like the onslaught of bourbon distilleries across the country, what we've seen is that has created new flavor profiles. So if you take one of my favorite craft distillers and spirits of French Lick, that flavor profile did not exist 10 years ago. It just did not exist. There might have been glimpses of it here and there, but that kind of like grain nuance was fairly void in the whiskey market. If you look at the trend of toasted and double oak from 10 years ago, there are brands who have staked their claims on the toasted, double oak, and things like that, and that has certainly been positive for producers. So that's two areas of like new age producers coming online from 10 years ago that I think have been good for the community. Where we see some negatives or when we have kind of like the same old, right? And a lot of bourbon producers, like their growth and where they are and how valuable they can be to consumers, a lot of that depends on their capital. So there have been brands that bought up MGP and then they were never heard of again, or they were one-hit wonders, or they had a 2-3 year run of good whiskey, and then after that they couldn't replace what they bought from MGP. So that part has been bad. There's been a lot of source whiskey companies that could not develop a brand outside of the whiskey itself, and that's dangerous. That's where I get excited about blenders like Barrel, and even my business partners at Bourbon Pursuit with what they're doing with Pursuit, the Pursuit series, the Pursuit United that they're doing. I feel like blending is possibly the greatest movement in American whiskey right now. I say possibly because there's so many shit blenders out there that it kind of weighs down the good ones. So good quality blending in American whiskey is awesome. New people coming in trying to do some type of blending exercise where they finish and all that. So many finishes are just basically being used to overcompensate for bad blending or bad whiskey. But yeah, so I guess that's a long way around my thought of like the explosion of producers has been mostly positive for bourbon consumers. The downside to where, the two downsides I can think of is that you're still not going to have the availability of product that you may want, and there is an influx of bad product hitting the shelves that you may not know is bad. And frankly, I can't taste it. I'm doing my best to not taste some of these bad things anymore. At least post reviews about it. I mean, I'll taste. I give plenty of negative reviews, but I'm telling you, I got so much bad whiskey this year, and I talked about it in my article for the top 100. But good Lord, I mean, it hurts my palate, and I can only take in so many units as a human being, even if I am spitting the whiskey out. But there's a lot of bad whiskey put out this year, a lot, and most of them were blends and finishes that just did not hit the mark. So anyway, that's a long answer for a pretty simple question, I think, for most. But thank you to Club Marzipan member Scott Corgle for what I thought was an excellent question. If you want to check out some of the questions that were asked to me in Club Marzipan, go over to the Club Marzipan community. You can find a link in the description. And they've been a very big part of my top 100. They got to see the behind the scenes of it. And, of course, they get first crack at my barrel picks. But I appreciate everyone who tunes in. And a big shout out to all my Club Marzipan members. You all are awesome. Thank you so much for sitting through this squeaky chair video. Be safe out there. And remember, vodka sucks unless it's being used to clean up the murder scene of a dead cat or hand sanitizer. Probably got to shorten that one. Cheers.